Hi again, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Flying Goat Farm podcast. Here's what's happening on the farm. So, I'm recording this on Christmas Eve, December 24th, and it's been rather a cold and windy week, but it's obviously not going to be a white Christmas for us. We have yet to have any even flurries around here. I know some of my friends who live just maybe 10 miles away. They have had flurries, but nothing sticking. We haven't even had a flurry yet, and definitely nothing is sticking yet. Um, Today, while it was cold in the morning, starting out in the 20s, it's now in the 60s and really quite warm. Um, but that's okay for everybody that, all of the farm animals that are out there, they are enjoying not having it be so terribly cold. And our chickens are doing really, really well. We're getting about 2 dozen eggs a day at this point, which is fantastic in the wintertime. It takes about 23 hours for a chicken to lay an egg. And so, what we have done in the wintertime specifically is that we have solar lights that burn throughout the night. And so that kind of tricks the chicken's body into thinking that it's actually a summer day instead of a short winter day, so that we still can keep up our production during the wintertime. So, if you have chickens farmers in your neighborhood or in your area, think about buying nice, healthy, farm raised, pasture raised chicken eggs for your family. They're healthy, they are beautiful, and you're supporting a local farmer, and not you know how can I say this in a nice way? So you're not buying from the industrial farming complex. You are knowing who your farmer is. You're knowing what their practices are. You're knowing that those chickens are raised in a humane way, giving them the feed that they need, and making really healthy eggs. So know your farmer, whether that's your fiber farmer, your egg farmer, your vegetable farmer. We're all around you. You just have to look. That's my soapbox for that part of here's what's happening on the farm. So, just as a quick review, this is the third part of a mini series inside of our season of creativity. So, for the past two podcasts, I've been talking to some of my friends about raising creative kids. So, in the first installment, I talked to Dallas Davidson about raising her boys, and the creative exercise was create in a series. We talked about how one of her sons has done several projects that are internet based and that are bringing in community and working within series, um, to create wonderful art. And in the second installment, I talked to Annie Marshall, who's Veggie Annie, and we talked about the developmental stages of creativity and creative play, and we talked about all the different ways that you can promote creativity within your household. And in that creativity exercise, we did a jar of dot dot dot. So in that creativity exercise, we were talking about putting out a jar of crayons, a jar of markers, a jar of paper, um, having having the supplies out and readily available for spontaneous creativity with yourself, your whole family, and your children. So today is the third installment, and I'll be talking to my friend Kerstin Zurbrigg. And I've known her for quite some time, but we've just recently done more natural dyeing together. And so I'm learning a lot more about her. I just love the wonderful opportunities that she gives her children and her homeschooling community, with all kinds of creativity. So I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. So, hi, Kirsten. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So I was we met, I think, like 15 years ago, right? Were we talking about
Yes.
that? Because
Yes.
we met here when we were already here, so it was 14 to 15 years ago. And you came over
Yes.
to learn how to spin, you and your
That's
daughter.
that's right. Yeah, you were offering a spinning class, and I think I had just finally chosen my first wheel. It took me 3 years to choose that wheel, and I was just getting my feet. Yeah, just really getting my groove in spinning. So it was fun, and I think I might have actually even purchased a fleece though before we actually met,
Oh,
and
yes,
that
that'd
is
be great.
and that is because your the name Flying Goat Farm really captivated my imagination. I could not resist Flying Goat.
Yeah, it's a fun one. People really are attracted to it.
Yes.
It's a funny story, so people love that. But we're here today to talk about raising creative kids. And I know that your children are highly creative, and you've also had experience working in schools in Waldorf school, correct?
Yeah, I have Waldorf teacher training in handwork, and I've actually worked mostly with the homeschool community and in different local community organizations.
So what have you noticed? I think we can both agree that and I think everybody that I'm going to be talking to today has agreed that children are innately creative. They're curious. They're exploring their world. They do, but it does need to be fostered. Correct?
Yeah, I do. I think certainly. I mean, I think it's always best to speak from experience. So for my own children, um, even going further back, I mean, I think that idea of fostering creativity, I can't even take credit for it. It was my parents that really set the road for me, and I recognized from the very beginning that the most, wonderful part about having children was that partnership that you had in their world of creative play from the very start. And so for me, it wasn't about helping them to be creative individuals. It was about creating the space for their creativity. And that sounds a little redundant, but it's really about um, making sure that creative play isn't disrupted in a way, and that you provide the architecture that allows for open-ended play in the very beginning of your child's life. So I think my role often felt like just protecting the space and allowing the space for creative play.
And how did you do
um, I think one of the
that?
biggest
Time
things.
aside? About setting time aside, or having
Yeah,
certain activities that would then like roll into more creative play?
yeah. I think one of the biggest things is was and for my parents as well is making our house. Um, I want to say almost like child centric, but it's not that. It's equal opportunities for everybody in every space of the house. So in a way, it means making sure that the living room is a place that a small person, a child, can inhabit without anyone having to say no, which is a disruptor to play. And so integrating natural play spaces in every aspect of your house seems like just the basic, and I could go on about that, but I think like the kitchen especially is one of those spaces where you always want to make sure that there are appropriate stools that a child can stand on to be involved, and that things are out of the way that need to be out of the way, and everything else, even having a low shelf with pots and pans that are accessible for, mud pies and whatnot in the kitchen, so there can be just yeah. And so there's that, and then there's having a play space. We sort of gave up a dining room early on, and put our dining room table in our kitchen, and developed a playroom. And I grew up with that as well. And the playroom, it was important that it wasn't in a basement or tucked away in a space upstairs, but it was actually part of the flow of the house, so that if you're cooking, you can see your child, or they can be in the playroom still working on what they're working on, and you don't have to say sorry, you have to move, or
Right.
interrupt it.
Or you have to wait until I have time to go downstairs with you or to the other room.
Right. And I mean, I think, and with that comes this whole notion of um, how to foster, or how to allow for independent play. What does that mean? So that it's not like there's a designated now we can play, or now is your time to play, but playing is happening all the time,
Right.
because the basis for um, creativity and artistic expression and all of that comes through play. I mean, that's sort of the beginning of it all. And so yeah, so it's important to um, and so the way in which you foster it, I think there's so many people that influenced my way of thinking about um, yeah, fostering that independence. But I think one of the biggest things for me was um, not being not sort of getting involved in and congratulating a child when they did something, not saying, "Oh, good job" all the time, things like that, because it interrupts our natural sense of what is good, and
Right.
then we start looking for other people to, give us the yeah,
Give us that feedback instead of feeling it
exact
from inside. And I think what you were
exactly,
saying about creative play as well, I think that I think a lot of adults have forgotten that a lot of our creativity again comes from playing around, playing with materials, and letting yourself, giving yourself the time without those interrupters, right? To be able um, to just sit and make something and just be in the flow of that.
right, yeah, exactly. And I think with that also comes like this sort of developing this um, warm space, where there's this feeling of trust and all of the things that we need to feel safe. And that's actually important too, because part of the creative process and the artistic process is actually making mistakes and then problem solving. And if you get into this pattern of sort of interrupting a child and saying, "Oh, I can help do that," or "I can fix this," or that's another factor that can sort of break the 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 natural um, train that we have, with problem solving as part of our creative process. And ultimately, the creative process, then it feeds into everything that we do as we mature into being larger people. It's part of it's the basis for creative independent thinking. So yeah, it's really at the root of everything, I think. Uh,
Well,
yeah.
and I think that when you say, "Oh, I can help you with that," it also takes away some of the self confidence, right? Like,
Yes.
"Oh, this, I didn't do it right," or that, that kind of thing. So you start losing that kind of the joy of
Yeah.
creating, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, it's a delicate balance. Because ultimately I mean, I think you do become a partner, to that creative process with your children, because you sort of you also want to make sure that it's not that things are always changing, and that there's accessibility to different things, so that they can grow and build as they mature, and that accessibility is not just books and painting supplies and access to being outside, but access to people that are also that have creative, that have passions and that have inspirations, so that children see it modeled in a way as well, and also see new directions, and it feeds them. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's about just just increasing experiences, right?
absolutely.
Until you can see what other people are doing or who other people are, it's really, you know, your your world is so limited, right? But as you have more experiences, then you can open up a little bit and see, oh, that person, you know, knows how to weave, so maybe I could learn how to weave. That
Right,
kind of thinking.
right,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and then your child starts asking for things, and that's also a wonderful thing, instead of you sort of assuming and saying it's time for us to learn how to weave. Your child will, if there's, the right situation and they see something inspiring, they'll then ask for, how, and you can give them what you can, and then you can find the teachers that can lead them too.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
So, did you notice anything in particular when your children were young that um, jumped out at you as far as like this is going to be an area where they're going to be more interested in creating, maybe?
yeah, I think we kind of come into the world with, I guess, what you might say, talents or proclivities to certain things, But I don't know if those are necessarily the things that we end up, you know, going into. Sometimes, I mean, certainly I noticed, I have three children, and I certainly noticed, a direction towards music early on, in one of my children, but they're all musical people and they all use music. And I mean, they all continue to make beautiful music in different ways. So, but I think sometimes, people are born with sort of like, oh, perfect pitch, or, can just sit down at a piano and imitate a song
Right.
immediately. But then
Or draw
others,
maybe.
yeah, yeah. And that's sort of, it's wonderful to be born with a facility, but I do believe that you can develop the facility to do what you want to do. And so sometimes that gift can just sort of go by the wayside almost, just because you don't end up pushing yourself. And sometimes when you really are struggling to get something, you develop more of a strength in your will. And that thing, that will really help you push through to maintain your discipline with one particular stream.
True. And also, that goes back into the idea of problem solving, right?
Mm,
Like, if you run up against something and you have to push through because you really want to do that, then that's also helping you with being a creative problem solver.
yeah. But I do know what you're asking though, and I do think that looking at my children, I mean, there's sort of, one of my eldest child really loved to be outside all the time and to be up in trees, and to sort of movement was super super important. And she really, she went down a road deep into the beautiful path of dance, for all of her teen years, and kept doing it through college. And it's integrated; it's part of her life. And the same I would say for my son, who um, really was born with that sort of perfect pitch, and then lost it through um, some health issues,
Oh,
and then had to develop, or I would say, I mean, no one told him he had to, but he developed his own way around music making without actually having that perfect pitch. And he developed his sense of pitch through hard work. And he's a
wow.
committed musician today. So yeah, I see that our children are born, but it's almost like when you're a young mom, and your children are showing these facilities and these interests and passions. It's hard to know how they're gonna, of course, how they're gonna take shape in later years. You just I think we just celebrate it when it's there,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And are there any like activities that you would suggest for young moms or dads that to help foster that creativity? Anything that's a specific
um,
exercise or activity that someone
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think it's that exposure, like going to concerts, going to theater performances, going to the museum on a regular basis, going to the zoo and watching, observing. I think the biggest, I guess, if you want to say exercise, is developing the space for observation through like a kind of consistency. So developing relationships that aren't just, a one off, but actually, are kind of you're on a long road with it. And those kinds of things, they really inform us, and they really, they're like our schooling. And we don't even think of it as schooling because we're enjoying it, but they feed us, and yeah, we return to them. So yeah, that, and I mean, I certainly could say things that have had an impact on my life or our lives. We really embrace the Suzuki method for music, for strings, violin and cello in our house. And I grew up playing violin, but not through the Suzuki method. Um, and I just have to say, I just found that the way of entering music as sort of a much more playful and joyous experience. I mean, with the right teacher, it really made music an integrated part of our life in a different way. So it wasn't just a music lesson; it was a full family engagement. So
So
I
I'm
think
not familiar with Suzuki. So can you tell us
yeah,
a little bit about that?
um, yeah, it's actually learning by ear, learning by imitation, which is really how children learn. If you think about it, right? It's how
Right,
we
right.
learn as individuals. We try things out, we see it, we try things out, we do things, and then we learn things. It's not, and so it's developing. Suzuki helps a child to develop a relationship between what they hear and how they use an instrument. And so it's more like using your voice in a way. So you become so comfortable with your instrument that you're hardly aware that it's not a part of your body.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
then you become so comfortable with the idea of translating something that you hear into the pattern in your instrument, that it becomes a very natural process. So you actually learn to read music much later in that particular um, philosophy, and there's a reason for it, because it's like you're developing, yeah, this natural relationship to music making, and the whole family is involved. As a parent, you go to lessons and you go to group classes, and group classes tend to be very playful, where the kids are coming, so it's a little celebratory where they come
Well, that
together
sounds
and play.
that sounds like a
Yeah.
lot more fun than we when I was growing up. Set the timer on the oven for your practice. Half an hour practice every day.
Yeah, well, there is practice though too, and I
Right,
have
but
to say, but we find ways to make it playful, and hopefully
right.
not that we're being coercive or tricking our children, that we're actually um, we feel a mutual agreement that this is worth our time. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's an integral part of your life,
Yeah,
and
and I
you
think
should be right.
yeah, and I think that's another thing, just to have that mindset that um, you know all artistic practices have as much value as anything in your life, because ultimately, you know we are creative beings and we always want to have something artistic. I mean, that's what keeps us going in life, whether
Right.
it's artistically thinking and problem solving, but or whether it's weaving a tapestry. And so if we sort of relegate artistic endeavors to the sort of after school hours or like maybe on the weekend, or we're sort of saying that's less important. But if we have a different way, if we shift our thinking so that we can embrace it in a different way, I think everybody's happier in the end.
Think you're totally right. I think that that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I've been talking about on the podcast is how do you art, like using art as a verb,
Yes.
because there are, and people don't think about it. You have to think a little creatively. That there is an art to accounting, for instance, right?
Exactly. Yes.
They call it medical arts, right? The culinary
Yes.
arts. There's so many different ways that we can art in our lives, right? And living that way is a lot more, open and joyful, I think.
Yes. Yeah, giving
Saying,
value
oh,
to
I'm an
those.
accountant and I have to go to work today.
That's right. That's right. No, I completely agree. It's like, putting art into this box that goes on the shelf, whereas actually we're all artistic beings. That's really ultimately why we're here. We all want to do things, and yeah, it's hard for people to maybe see accounting as something beautiful, but actually working with numbers is very beautiful and artistic. You have to actually see things spatially, and you have to have a certain way of working to be able to do that, and there's beauty to it. So yeah.
Right. My husband's an engineer, and so he's mostly working in zeros and ones, right? But then if you go and look at his computers, it's all different colors, it's all different shapes of things on these graphs, and it's like, whoa, I don't even know what you're doing, but it is really artistic.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Something.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for joining me today. I think I gained a lot of insight, and I know that my listeners will too.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's so much fun to talk with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, hi, Kirsten. So, yeah, that was a fun conversation, wasn't it? Sorry for that little blip at the end, but things happen every once in a while. So, here's your new creative exercise for the next couple weeks, and this one is fun, and it's make a huge mess. So, thinking back into your childhood, that your best days or the best days of your kids are when they have gotten really messy, when there's sand in your bathing suit and ice cream on your face. Some those days are some of the most meaningful, joyful, wonderful days of your life. When we seek perfection, perfection is the killer of creativity. When we want things to be perfect, then we have limited our possibilities. When we think that, the only great way to live is what we see on those Instagram perfect pictures, then you limit yourself. You're not having the ice cream on the beach. You're not having those wonderful memories. So, and don't remember to tell that committee to take the day off and get lost too, because perfection is the killer of creativity. So this week, make some messes, and it could be a physical mess, or it could just be like sing in your car with the music all the way up on high and the windows down, if as long as it's not snowing or raining, right? Um, Dance like no one is watching. Pull out some creative supplies and just make something. You don't have to show it to anyone. It's yours and it's part of your flow and it's part of your being. And um, and like all of these conversations that I've had with my friends have shown, the making is the most important part. So I do hope that you'll make some huge messes in the next couple of weeks. Just to let you know, you can always follow Kirsten's Instagram. She's at Indigo Lady. She does great natural dyeing, and if you're interested in that, um, please be sure and follow her. And remember to let me know how it's going. Tag me on a social media post at Flying Goat Farm, or send me a comment, or send me an email, or there's a new feature on Anchor.fm that you can leave me a voicemail even. I'd love to hear how it's going for you. And so until next time, happy making.